Well, thank you, Java, for the nice introduction, and thank the organizer for inviting me. As you all know, I'm probably the outsider to this field. I'm a trained economist, and my area of expertise is finance and money and liquidity in the market. So this project, the making of dominant currencies, evidence in DeFi, is basically motivated by my work at the IMF on CBDC, and it's co-authored with Java as well as my IMF colleague Tommaso, and my normal co-author, regular co-author in my other project, Emre. To motivate the topic, dominant currency. You probably all heard about term dominant currency. So Paul Krugman actually is the first one invented the term vehicle currency, which is the currency used by trading partners, where none of the trading partner will use the currency domestically. So in this case, you can see from this graph is from Gita and Oleg's International Finance chapter, one of the review chapter, and they collect the data on the use of currency for trade, which is the last column, and financial flows internationally. You can see already there's a dominant use of dollar, followed by euro. But dollar is strictly the leading dominant currency. And then international financial flow is about 6 times as large as the trade. Still, you can see the dollar is often used for store of value, which is the first one, foreign exchange reserves, or denominate all the cross-border borrowings, international debt. Also used for currency exchanges, for exchange, for foreign loan and the deposit. So why we care about dominant currency? Well, obviously it has major implications for optimum monetary policy design, because there will be monetary policy spillover for dominant country to the rest of the world, and also for financial development and transaction cost, etc. I came to this topic mostly because from the design of CBDC perspective. So if we know what are the features of dominant currency, or be informative for the design of CBDC in the future. Historically, what we know is there are only one dominant currency at the time, and tend to be very sticky, and this dominant currency regime, and there's very slow switch between the dominant currencies. For those of you who want to learn a bit of history, and the Dutch florin, which is a debt instrument collateralized by the coin guilder, was the leading dominant currency in the 18th century, then taken over by pounds, and as you all know, dollars. The euro was introduced to compete for this dominant status, and you can see there's euro made is in Europe, but although not as successfully, and Yuan recently, you probably heard the news in the recent days about trade invoicing start switching between countries to yen instead of the dollar. So this is an active area of even in the policy room. So how do we learn about the main driver of making dominant currencies? Very difficult using historical data. mostly because the macro environment is very slow or changing. And then we turn to DeFi. It's an area very unique. There are lots of currencies. They are used for different purposes. Utility coins, as you all know, deposit receipts, stable coins, various instruments for payment, trading, hedging, voting, insurance, etc., etc. There's lots of shocks, fast pace, and potentially you see a lot of switches. And theoretically, it's easier to switch between currencies for different usages. So we're going to use DeFi as a lab to conduct a natural experiment to see whether there are any dominant currency in DeFi and what are the properties. To examine its properties, we examine from the perspective how well a currency performs the typical roles of money. 3 roles, that's the traditional 3 roles: medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account. So try to look at the function of each dominant currency from these 3 perspectives. And we look at whether there's only one or basket of dominant currencies, whether there will be a frequent regime switches among all these dominant currencies, and what are the features of dominant currency in boom or bust. So various other properties. And we also want to see, to make a currency dominant, what are the potential drivers. So that's basically the research question. So how we conduct our analysis, we focus on Ethereum because it has the largest DeFi ecosystem, and we'll collect the exchange data from Uniswap, and also use the data from Aave and Compound, which are the protocols for loanable funds. Let me just focus on the unique features of DeFi, which we utilize for analysis. And this slide shows the typical form of transactions in AM-based decentralized exchange. You see either direct swaps between tokens, so this is A to B, or you see the indirect trade, A to B, N to C. So I want to highlight token B. Token B is what do we call betweenness tokens. Also, if you make an analogy to the international trade, and B is a vehicle token. It's a bridge token. And it's not the ultimate or not the important output token. It's there purely to lower the transaction cost. So we're interested in the role of token B as medium exchange. Medium exchange is to lower the transaction cost. So this will be a very important observation. We're going to utilize that to construct our measurement. And also we look at the split trade. Again, B is this bridge token, and the trade is split into 2 to lower the transaction cost. We're going to ignore the arbitrage trade, which is the loop trades, for this analysis. So what are the unique features? Let me just repeat of that we use to conduct our analysis. We collect all the data of all the asset swaps because we can map out the network, the trading network, and we use the optimizing router data to distinguish the roles of cryptocurrency, and we identify the order trade into categorize all the trade into two categories, between trade and ultimate trades. The between trades are the trades motivated by lower the transaction cost, and between tokens are considered as a vehicle currency, and they are dominant. Dominant use of it means it has a dominant status as a media exchange. The ultimate trades are the trades involve source and target tokens. These trades are motivated not by lowering the transaction costs per se, mostly for speculation, investment, or store of value, or unit account, for reasons other than the media exchange. So for source and dominant token, any dominant a metric will indicate they are dominant in roles other than media exchange. So that's those are the motivation or measurement or construct the measurement. Let's look at the data. So we collect the data from several platforms: Uniswap, V2, V3, Compound, RV, and the underlying to get the general market data. So I want to repeat all these numbers on the slide just to give you an idea. We collect the data from May 18, 2020 to January 2023. And use the crypto index data. I'll construct boom bust cycle of the market. Here the bust is highlighted by pink. So given this, we're going to overlay this boom bust period on the graph we show later. Here's a snapshot of the trading network in Uniswap V2 and V3. We have actually a movie showing the dynamic transition of these network over time. You can see already V2 by design carried over and from earlier version, WEs is the leading node in this network, followed by USDC. And when V3 is introduced, you see more involvement for Bitcoin, WBTT, and USDC become even more dominant as a node. You see other stable coins also playing a bigger role. So we're going to try to formalize that. In terms of classification between type of trades, volume, remember we categorize trades between and ultimate. You can see about 10% to as low as 2% are between trade. So how do we measure dominance? We can just use the simple market share. This is basic the first graph I showed you in international trade and financial system share of all the different currencies. We can do the same. We look at the volume share as ultimate source of token coins based on the volume, the ultimate volume, or the total volume. And we'll also construct influence score based on eigenvector centrality. Since we have a network, right, we can construct this centrality influence score relatively easily. We can compute eigenvector centrality based on all directional trade, because inflow and outflow, and including both the betweenness and the ultimate volume. Or can only include the ultimate value, which is which we focus here. These are trade. These centrality measures based on trade that motivated by reasons other than lowering the transaction cost. And lastly, we look at the trades that purely to lower transaction costs. That is a media of exchange role of money. And all these measures are based on betweenness volume, volume share, or betweenness centrality, either equally weighted or volume weighted. So I will not go over how to construct between centrality and the eigenvector centrality. They are standard following the network literature. Let's just see what we have learned. So this is time series volume share based on the ultimate volume. You can see in Uniswap V2, ETH has a clear dominance, and this status doesn't change over time. When V3 is introduced, the USDC obviously is competing with ETH. If you combine the two, you see even a clear pattern, which is remember the pink column, each pink column denotes a bust, right? So every time there's a bust, you see the rise of volume share for USDC. So the rise of USDC, each rise is basically powered by bust. This first one is basically the artifact of addition of these three. It's not had nothing to do with the bust, but the rest you can see clearly. Stable coins become more dominant currency as after each bust. This time series graph of eigenvector centrality. From eigenvector centrality perspective, this is not a volume share. This is an importance, influence score. Given the network structure, you don't see much ETH being challenged as much. The dominant status didn't really change over time, but there's a battle among the stable coins. As early days, USDT is about the same dominance with USDC. Clearly, USDC is the winner among all stable coins. Right. We'll also look at as a vehicle currency, as a medium exchange, what are the features for these top leading coins? WEs actually is still the leading coin, but its dominant status dropped after during basically the bust, where the stable coins start to increase. So you do see a change over time. In fact, probably more change, more competition as a media exchange among the currencies for dominance. Another thing to learn is the dominant currency for large trades tend to be stable coins rather than WEs. This shows a bit from the V3 graph. The green line is USDC. If you look at the volume share, this shows even more clearly. From V3, USDC volume shares much larger than ETH. Took over at least as in terms of volume share, which means it's intermediating a lot of large volume trades. And we look at the Herfindahl index to see whether there's a basket or just one dominant currency. If you look at the betweenness centrality, you look at the Herfindahl index, you see actually early days, there's strong concentration. There's probably only one inverse of Herfindahl index is number of dominant currencies. So one way to think about this. So there, in the early days, there will be there's a huge concentration, and there's a lot of computation. And later, and as a medium exchange for other roles, you see the dominant currency around 3, quite relatively stable. But for medium exchange, there's lots of regime switching. Try to explain the Herfindahl indices in the time series regression, and see why we observe in certain period there's higher concentration, and some period there's less concentration. You see in boom, I'll just highlight, just focus on, because a lot of numbers here, just look at these colored numbers. So during the boom period, you see there's higher concentration for betweenness centrality. And basically this means during the boom, there's concentration of few coins as a preferred vehicle currency. Translate to, if we think about this to the real economy, we will say during the boom, there are very few world currencies, either just US dollar or euro to intermediate international financial flows or trade. If gas price, when the transaction cost is high, again, you see concentration of medium exchange, dominant currency as a medium exchange. If the volatility of the transaction cost is high, again, you see the same pattern. So when do we see the opposite? When the world is more segmented. So we look at the number of clicks in the network. When there are lots of segmentation in the higher degree of segmentation in the network, you see lower concentration. Again, this may say when the world becomes more integrated, you see actually more concentration in dominant currency. And for other roles, the unit count, the store value, we draw slightly different conclusions. We see when the price is high, when the transaction cost is high, when the volatility of transaction cost is high, you see less concentration for currencies for other purposes, store value and unit count. We also did the analysis to see which role is important during the boom and during the bust by conducting lead-lag analysis. Basic conclusion is medium exchange role is very important during the boom. During the bust is less important. We also look at what are the drivers for dominant currency. There are a lot of numbers here. I won't go over them, so I'm just going to summarize for you. This is a cross-section, no regression, because we have 50 tokens. We have all their characteristics, their risk characteristics, and risk in terms of with the market risk, idiosyncratic risk, while also in terms of safety. We look at the if the stable coins, we look at the percentage for market share. So basically how safe it is. And we also look at asset use as a deposit in RV and compound. So this is the storage to measure the storage and the money market, the role of money market. We also use the correlation with working capital. So you think about the transaction fee, gas fee is the working capital on the market size. So these are, we do find the conclusion is market risk is important, lower the dominance, and safety also very important, but only the largest stable coin that matters. So you're not all safety the same. Also find the deposit, the existence of money market is very important for currency to become dominant. And market size also important. So we also did the event study and a similar conclusion. So let me just conclude. We have found there's several dominant currencies in DeFi. We also find the rise of stable coins. Later in the sample, more dominant currencies, the more segmented market, concentration for dominant currencies are quite different for vehicle currencies and other type of dominance. Stable coins with quality important. Again, let me emphasize this again. No, not all stable coins the same. Many market very important for dominance. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
That was perfect timing. I think we have around 5 minutes for questions for Q&As.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. I guess maybe it's because of my field. I was wondering whether you thought of looking at market concentration happening after big crime events taking place in the DeFi ecosystem. So I could think that some events that are so big that people kind of get frightened out and ended up going into those like certain currencies.
Yeah.
Have you thought of that?
Yeah, so we actually look into very good suggestion. So we try to we try to capture the dynamic first, try to explain why you see a certain increase. For example, USDC versus USDT, right? So we use a boom bust to capture that, but we're planning to introduce more event as a control. Another thing I didn't highlight, which is not just the flight to safety is a phenomenon, but you can see a little bit of flight to quality, and Bitcoin BTC actually every time there's a bust and Bitcoin dominance increase a bit. It's not the most actively, it's not vehicle currency for a reason you all know. There's no smart contract capability, there's no active money market, and there's no ecosystem, but still it's a quality asset. So all these matters, the scandals, the risk, the reservation of participants definitely matter. We use a boom bust to capture that, but the other major events will also be important too. Yeah, very good suggestion. Thank you.
Also from my side, thanks for this super interesting talk from my perspective. I saw your analysis ended 1st of January 2023, right?
Yeah.
Do you have an intuition what the recent events on stablecoins, the DPEC would mean for this study? I mean, I know you don't have the results, but
well, I want to
tell me your gut feeling.
So this is actually very good because these sets are not stablecoins are not really stable. So your USDC you would think is a relatively compared to other safer, but even though it's by the rule for U.S. regulators but exposed to the shock in the real economy. It's, in that sense, it's not safe. It's not the backstop for the whole DeFi system. It's not like a regular currency. So, yeah. So I think the definition of safety will be quite important. And what kind of shocks the stable coins are exposed to? Inflation shock and in the recent case was the banking system, in the US, right? So yeah, I guess that's the general direction. There's no stable stable coins.